So there's just a few other things I like to talk about in terms of what color grading is and its uses and everything. It's quite different from the what's happening within the film industry because the film industry uses these color tables or LUTs as they're called, and they have several different formats that you can call them. They're different, like a dot 3D L LUT or a dot LOOK dot cube and so on, and you'll see those in Photoshop and under the adjustment layer. Um, but and there's other ways to color grade a photo within Photoshop or Lightroom, which is different than just importing something from somewhere. In Lightroom, you can adjust your photo and create a preset and apply this to other photos. It can be done by utilizing the basic panels, white balance, and tone controls, as well as the HSL panel. In Photoshop, what's preferred are the hue saturation adjustment layer and the selective color adjustment layer, where you can access all the different color tones from red to magenta. But the selective color tone is better, as the fashion industry likes, because it includes the whites, neutrals, and blacks. When they're looking at a backdrop or background, they can adjust, whether the shadows or the lights or the darks are and neutrals are being adjusted. Um, and but I think what's important to talk about is the difference between gradient map versus color lookup tables. And both LUTs and gradient maps, they both can use the blend modes and the opacity slider in Photoshop, and so that seems to make them equal. But just because someone made the LUT, you really don't have any idea about what process was used in the original photo it came from, or even what that photo looked like. In Photoshop, the LUT has to be at the top of the layers panel, and it's not an adjustment layer in the way that curves or hue saturation or any other layer are, and that the only adjustments you can make to it are in the blend modes and the opacity slider. So that's really not a lot of control. And it stated later when I was going to talk about this. In Photoshop, compared to film editing software, it's a rather hit and miss approach. It's not much better than really a preset in Lightroom. Photoshop does not easily emulate the workflow or process capable in dedicated film software, which has all of this stuff integrated in a way that they can work things on the fly. Um, and also, in terms of Photoshop, with a gradient map, you know all about the original photo you used to generate the gradient map, including the adjustments you made in Lightroom. And that's sort of in your mind as your workflow, so that you kind of take it from Lightroom into Photoshop. Then you know what your adjustments were. You can create some other adjustments. You can apply a gradient map. And what's really nice about the gradient map is that it can be put anywhere within in the adjustment layers. Uh, so you can bring in your photo. You can adjust it a bit more, and then maybe you might want to bring in the gradient map to see how that works, and then you might want to see, maybe I'll take away some of those other layers. I might want to add some layers on top of that, and it's just a great flow in Photoshop. And I think that's what we have to think about is how the workflow is and how that all works. Um, so the other thing is that in the video on how this process works, you can open the gradient editor at any time and add colors, subtract colors, move colors along the scale, change the range of a color, and save your changes as an additional gradient map. So it's a huge advantage. So even though you think you've got it close, and because really this is for putting in a book or putting on a wall somewhere, so you want to make sure that you're creating something that's not taking away from the image that's there, but it's making it look so it belongs in some way. And I think that's the most important thing. um, and I I think that it's, I guess I'm kind of talking about an argument for gradient maps, but I think in photography it really makes a lot of sense. It's a very different process, and Photoshop handles it well. And if you are comfortable with layers and all these sorts of things, then it's really a wonderful process.